who lied the most during the debate?
My guess would be Mr. Ford. And that's why I challenged him if he had talked to a nurse lately.
Well, Ontario's election is on June 2nd, and everybody's wondering across the province, who should I vote for? Who should you vote for? Well, we're going to help you. Hey, welcome to News You Can Use. I'm your host, Brandon Gonez. And before we go any further, I need you to do a few things, like subscribing to this channel, tapping that notification bell, smash the like button, and don't forget to follow us on all of our social media. The details are in the description below. So we've sent out invitations to all of Ontario's major party leaders to come on the show for a one-on-one conversation. Many have replied saying yes, some have not replied as of yet. But first up today is Green Party leader Mike Schreiner.
Mr. Ford, have you talked to a nurse lately? Have you talked to a nurse about how disrespected they feel? How overworked and underpaid and underappreciated they are? How insulted they feel being called heroes and then essentially having their wages cut by having them frozen?
Ontario Green Party leader Mike Schreiner, thanks so much for joining me here on the BG Show and News You Can Use again. Good to see you.
Hey, Brandon, it's a pleasure to be on. Good to see you as well.
And how are you feeling? Because I know that you were diagnosed with COVID just a few days ago.
Yeah, I feel great. I was very lucky, mild symptoms. I'm full of energy today and have been out doing a lot of virtual campaign events, and we'll be back in person soon.
Alrighty, well, let's get into it because a lot of people are eager to see this interview and to hear what you have to say. I mean, I want to just ask you right off the bat, are you running to be Premier of the province? Or are you looking to increase the number of seats that the Green Party will have?
Well, first of all, I think I'd make the best Premier of the four leaders on offer right now. I've got the experience, I've got the vision, especially how we can build a caring, connected, climate-ready province. I think I performed very well in the leaders debate last week. But I also know, and it's important to be honest with people, it'll be very hard to go from one seat to the Premier's chair. And so, you know what, we're hoping to increase the number of Green MPPs we have. We've had an outsized influence with our first Green MPP. Most people say we punch well above our weight and have a lot of influence at Queen's Park. And so I want to grow our caucus, and I'm looking at ridings like Parry Sound Muskoka with Matt Richter, University Rosedale with Diane Sachs, Dufferin-Caledon with Laura Campbell, Abhijit Manet in Beaches East York. We have a number of really strong candidates across the province, and I want to go back to Queen's Park with a caucus of Green MPPs so we can work hard to make life better for people.
All right, you have high ambition, as they say in the Caribbean. All right, let's talk about it. I want to talk about cost of living and affordable housing because this was one of the biggest topics when we posed the question to our audience of what do you want us to ask Mike Schreiner? They said affordable housing and cost of living. It's the big topic. So talk to me about your plan, especially when it comes to housing costs across Ontario. What does that look like if the Greens were to increase their seats in the Ontario legislature? What would you do?
Yeah, well, we would bring new solutions to this old problem that actually work for people. So the Ontario Greens, we released a housing affordability strategy last June, the largest circulation paper in the country, called a masterclass in delivering the solutions that Ontarians need.
And what were the highlights?
So first of all, let's get speculation out of the housing market. Homes should be for people, not speculators. So we've been pushing for a non-resident speculation tax increase, a vacant home tax increase, and the only party calling for a multiple home speculation tax. So these big corporations and deep-pocketed speculators who are buying up so much housing that we save that housing for people, especially first-time home buyers. I mean, I have a daughter, she's at an age where, you know, she's thinking about buying her first home and wondering if she'll ever be able to afford one. So that's first of all. Second, let's build more housing supply that's affordable within our existing communities so we don't pave over the farmland that feeds us and the wetlands that protect us from climate-fueled extreme weather events. How do we do that? Get rid of exclusionary zoning. Make it easy for people to build duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, tiny homes, secondary suites, laneway housing, basement apartments, so we can ramp up supply and create new revenue streams to help first-time homebuyers be able to afford their mortgages. And then the third big area is government has to get back involved in housing again. In the mid 1990s, the province got out of supporting affordable housing, and the crisis has been getting worse ever since then. So the Ontario Greens have a costed plan that says, let's stop subsidizing electricity prices for wealthy homeowners, and let's redirect that money for people who can't even afford to have a home. And let's build 182,000 deeply affordable community rental housing spaces that would include 60,000 permanent supportive housing spaces with wraparound mental health, addictions, and other supports to address chronic homelessness. And let's commit to 22,000 Indigenous-owned, Indigenous-led affordable housing spaces. By supporting co-ops and nonprofits and other community-based housing solutions, we can build that deeply affordable housing that people need, so we can address needs across demographics and across the continuum of housing needs.
And what's your stance on rent control?
Yeah, so we support rent control. We should have province-wide rent control, and we should have vacancy control as well. So we avoid these rent evictions that are happening, and then having landlords increase the rent significant, making that rental space unaffordable. We have to make sure that people can afford to pay the rent. I mean, in a place like Toronto, a minimum wage worker has to work 85 hours to be able to afford the average one-bedroom apartment. That is completely unsustainable.
So what does rent control look like under, a Green-led government? Does that mean it's tied to the rate of inflation, or is there going to be a set standard? What does that look like for the average person?
Yeah, so it's keeping rents where they are right now, allowing for small increases if a building owner needs to be able to, renovate and upkeep, because we also got to maintain quality. Pardon?
An increase like 1%, 2%?
Yeah, it'd be like 1 or 2% that would be needed to maintain the upkeep of a building. So, obviously you don't want buildings to deteriorate and have people in substandard or unsafe living conditions. So you want to make sure you maintain the safety and quality of the housing while keeping it affordable for people who are paying rent.
Okay. I'm glad we got to touch on housing. I got to talk on the other thing that everybody's talking about, which is the price at the pumps. It's an interesting topic because as the Green Party, I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't assume, you tell me, that, it is what it is for your party, because the gas is not probably something you guys want to see subsidized, but it is really high right now, and people want to see it fixed. What would you do to address the crazy high prices at the pumps?
Yeah, let's get big oil out of our wallets and out of our lives, especially at a time when we're facing a climate emergency. We're the only party really putting forward solutions that say, hey, let's address the climate crisis and make life more affordable for people at the same time.
So would you tackle the price at the pumps, or would you just leave it alone?
We would help people, the average person, buy electric vehicles.
How so?
The average person can save $2,000 a year on fuel costs by driving electric. So we're offering a $10,000 rebate for the purchase of a new electric vehicle, a $1,000 rebate.
But what about the people who can't afford an electric car? There's a lot of people who can't even afford a new car. They can only afford maybe a used car, for example.
I was just getting ready to say that, Brandon. We're also a $1,000 rebate on a used electric car as well as a $1,000 rebate on an electric bike. The actual market for electric bikes is growing faster than electric cars. And so the best way we can help people save money at the pumps is to get the pumps out of our lives. And so having a plan, so like my electric vehicle, for example, it lists for $38,000 right now. With our $10,000 rebate combined with the $5,000 rebate the federal government is offering, that's now a $23,000 car. And when you think about how much money you save filling your car up with electricity, like it cost me like $5 to fill it up with electricity. Meanwhile, you're paying over $100. We also know there's a lot of used electric vehicles out there. So providing a $1,000 rebate, and then obviously making electric bikes affordable for people, which is a great way to get around as well. We're also proposing cutting transit fares in half so people can afford to get back on transit while still making sure that we're making the investments that transit is reliable and higher levels of service than what we have right now.
But your plan was to cut transit fares in half for, 3 months or 6 months, I believe. The Liberals, the Ontario Liberals, were saying that they would drop it all the way down to $1 for a fare for the next 2 years. So would you match that promise?
Yeah, here's the challenge, Brandon. First of all, is affordability. So that's why we're saying cut transit fares in half. But the second is high quality of service and the reliability of that service. And so we're making a substantial increase in the investment in increasing service levels and making the service more reliable. I mean, if you're standing there and you're waiting an hour for a bus and you're going to pay $1, you're probably going to be pretty disappointed. But if we increase the reliability of service, so a bus is coming every 10 minutes or so, and you're paying half the price, that means you get affordability and service reliability at the same time. That's what it's going to take to triple transit use, which is our objective to do in the next decade. And then the final thing I would say, and this is connected to our housing strategy, we need to build communities where people can live, work, play, and shop locally. The Ford government, especially's agenda to build more highways, is just going to lead people to be forced into taking more long, expensive, soul-crushing commutes, having to drive until they qualify for a mortgage. So the more we can build connected communities where you don't have to commute, we're going to save people money and improve quality of life and address the climate crisis.
All right, we're going to hold off on the criticism of Doug Ford until the end, because I just want to focus on the Green Party's platform and what you guys are offering for voters, okay? Could I get your promise on that one?
Oh, yeah, sounds good.
Let's talk about solutions, because that's what our viewers ask for. They want to hear about the platforms. What are the solutions? So students, they want to know what's going on for them. What are you offering them?
Yeah, so we are putting forward a plan to reverse the cuts to the Ontario Student Assistance Program
For OSAP.
and to transfer the existing loans to grants. Also saying remove the interest on all student debt right now to make university more affordable. In addition to that, freezing tuition rates so we keep universities and colleges affordable. Ontario has the highest per capita tuition rates in the country and the lowest per capita funding for post-secondary education in the country. We would reverse that by making education more affordable and putting more money into post-secondary education to increase the quality to benefit young people.
Okay, let's talk about the COVID recovery in the healthcare system. A lot of our viewers wanted to know, what is your stance on the mandates that are still in place if you were to get elected or have a more significant impact in the Ontario legislature? What does that look like under Mike Schreiner and the Green Party?
Yeah, so we've been saying, let's utilize all the tools we have to get past the pandemic. I mean, obviously the pandemic is still with us. I mean, Andrea Horvath and I just caught COVID in the last week, and there's still a number of people who are contracting the virus and being admitted to hospital. So we have a plan we're putting forward to invest in dealing with the repair backlog in our schools. Part of that would be improving ventilation. Secondly, we have to increase healthcare capacity by investing in the people who deliver healthcare. So ensuring that we have enough nurses and other frontline healthcare professionals and that we pay them living wages so that we retain them, because we're going to need to make sure we maintain capacity in our healthcare system. In long-term care, making sure that we prioritize people over profits. And then when it comes to supporting small businesses, ensuring that small businesses are getting the funding support they need from government so they can stay open, stay in business, help our economy recover. We think if we make those kinds of investments, we can avoid any further lockdowns or additional mandates.
We did get a viewer question that asked, they wanted to know, what is your stance on unvaccinated individuals? Should they be allowed to return to work post-pandemic? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, so first of all, I respect and understand people who have chosen not to get vaccinated. I mean, everyone should be able to make their own choice about their healthcare decisions. And I don't agree with politicians who have been demonizing people who have chosen to or not get vaccinated. That being said, I have supported healthcare facilities, hospitals, and other healthcare providers who have brought in vaccine mandates as a way to protect the patients they serve and their coworkers. And so my perspective will be to be guided by the advice of healthcare professionals and the people who have the knowledge around what are the best ways to keep people safe and make sure our healthcare institutions remain open and able to provide the capacity to care for people. And most of them now are continuing to say that it is important for healthcare workers to be vaccinated, and I will support their professional decision in that regard.
Okay, let's talk about mental health. Because I know it's a very big staple in your guys' platform. You guys were the first party, I think, in Ontario's history to release a mental health specific platform. So what do you want people to know about this particular platform?
Yeah, well, first of all, we are proud to be the first to put forward a standalone mental health strategy. And one of the key components of it is to make mental health services available through OHIP.
So anybody will be able to access. If they need mental health services, they'll just be able to go into a mental health facility, show their OHIP card, and they'll be able to get access.
That's right, exactly. You would get mental health services through OHIP. And we're also proposing that we shift the way in which we approach the addictions crisis we're facing in Ontario. It should be treated as a public health emergency, not a criminal justice issue. So we would work in advocating that the federal government decriminalize drug use, because we know that that directly impacts the safety of supply and people reaching out for help. We would also recognize the intersection oftentimes between race, mental health, and substance use and police interactions. And we're proposing a 3-digit crisis line for somebody who is experiencing a mental health crisis to call for mental health support, not for armed police support. I've talked to a number of police themselves who say, hey, we're not trained to deal with a mental health crisis. We should be sending mental health care workers, not police officers, in response to crisis calls.
Alrighty. I was going to talk about the environment specifically, but I do believe we've touched on that with a lot of the other topics because the environment is such a focus now, whether you're talking affordable housing, whether you're talking about transit, all those things. So I want to hear from you now. Okay, we've gone through a bit of your policy, a bit of your platform. Great. What people do also want to know is, how do you pay for it? How do you guys plan to pay for it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brandon, because in some ways, a promise is a bit of an empty promise if you don't have a plan to pay for it. And so one, we would redirect some existing funding priorities and we would look at new revenue sources. So where would we redirect? Well, first of all, we would reverse the Ford government's decision to remove the license fees on license plates. I'm the only MPP in the legislature to vote against that. That's draining billions of dollars a year out of public funds that should be going to improving healthcare, education, and housing affordability. Secondly, I mentioned this in our housing plan, is we would put in a means test or a cap on who receives the subsidies for electricity prices in Ontario. Right now, the CEO of Rogers, the CEO of Hydro One, all receive electricity subsidies that's costing taxpayers $6.9 billion a year to be the only jurisdiction in all of North America that directly subsidizes electricity prices. We're also asking the wealthiest, the people who earn over $200,000 a year, to pay 1% more in their income taxes to help be able to fund the things we need to fund, like better healthcare, education, climate action, and housing affordability. And we're asking the largest, wealthiest corporations to pay a 2% increase in their corporate income tax, which would really put Ontario at about the same corporate tax rate of other provinces in the country, to be able to fund the commitments that we have in our platform.
Can you be candid with me? What do you actually think about Doug Ford?
On a one-on-one level, I actually have had some, very positive conversations with Doug Ford. But on a policy level, I fundamentally oppose Mr. Ford's agenda.
Do you think he's failed Ontario?
I think he's failed to prepare this province to be ready for the climate emergency, and I think that's going to have real negative impact on our finances, on the affordability, and our economy. 65 million jobs will be created in the emerging markets of the new climate economy globally in the next decade. And the question is, will Ontario put in place the climate action plans we need to be able to attract that investment in those jobs to this province, to generate the economic prosperity we need to ensure that young people have access to new career and better job opportunities, and do it in a way that addresses the biggest crisis we've ever faced, which is the climate emergency. And the Ontario Greens have put forward a plan that shows how we can crush climate pollution, create jobs, address affordability concerns, and quite frankly, Mr. Ford has taken Ontario backwards, not forwards, when it comes to addressing the climate crisis and environmental protections.
Out of all the four major party leaders, including yourself, who do you believe lies the most?
Lies the most.
It's okay. The people, listen, the people are so tired of politicians politicking.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Brandon.
They just want to know. So in your opinion, and including yourself, you can say yourself too, but I don't know if I would if I were you. But who do you feel lies the most?
You know what I would do? I don't want to cop out and not answer this, but the Toronto Star has been sending a fact checker around with each leader and fact checking each of us. So I would refer to somebody who's professionally checking the facts to answer that question for you. But the one thing I will say, and I think this is one of the reasons that so many people have given me high marks for my performance in the leaders debate last week, is that I have a level of honesty and authenticity that I think people want in politicians.
I heard that too. I heard that on the streets. People were like, they really appreciated your performance. It was literally, our audience was like, we like Schreiner, we like Schreiner, we like how he performed. So then let me rearrange the question. Who lied the most during the debate?
My guess would be Mr. Ford.
I appreciate your candid answer. I don't want to end it on a negative note, so I would love to also know, who would you choose out of the three other leaders, Andrea Horwath, Stephen Del Duca, Doug Ford, to grab a drink with?
You know what? I'd be happy to have a drink with any one of those three. And I'll say this really candid.
But you can only choose one. You have a VIP invite. You have a VIP invite to, our show's launch party. Okay, unlimited drinks. There's flowing hors d'oeuvres. Okay, all the caviar, all the best things. Who are you gonna take with you?
Well, the person I've probably talked with the most, interacted with the most, is Ms. Horwath, because both of us have served in the legislature together for the last 4 years, and I think we've developed a good relationship. So yeah, I'd be happy to have a drink with her, but any of the other two leaders. But the one thing I'll say, and this is really important, I think one of the things that separates Greens from other political parties is we're willing to work across party lines, to collaborate, to put people first. And I've always said that I'm motivated by putting people before politics and putting what's good for my constituents ahead of, what may be good for my partisan political objectives. And I think we need more of that in politics right now, because I'm really worried about the rising levels of hate we see in our society and how that's reflected in the toxicity we're increasingly seeing in our political discourse as well.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because my producer actually wanted me to ask you that question. We are seeing a rise of hate crimes and discrimination, not just in Ontario, across the country, across the world. Do you have a plan to address that? What would you do? Would you criminalize, let's say, racism in Ontario?
Yeah, I tell you what, Brandon, we absolutely have to go beyond condemning hate and speaking out against hate to legislative action. And that includes rooting out and dismantling hate groups and bringing criminal action against hate groups and people who engage in hate-motivated speech and violence. We need to pass legislation like the Our London Family Act that's designed to combat Islamophobia and ensure that everyone, whether you worship in a mosque or a gurdwara or a synagogue or a church, wherever, that you're safe doing that you're safe walking down the street, regardless of what clothes you have on, the color of your skin, your ability, whether, what your sexual identity is, gender identity. So we need to back up condemnation with legislative action.
Alrighty. Well, Mike Schreiner, I appreciate the candid conversation. Thank you for coming on the show. It was a pleasure to go through the platform and just to ask some off-the-cuff questions as well, and good luck on June 2nd.
Hey, I appreciate it, and thanks for taking the time to have a good conversation.
Hey BG Squad, thanks so much for checking out our channel, and listen to this, we have more great content for you, like this video right here and this video right here. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to this channel right now and tap that notification bell.